and Kay Ockey are the founders of Sensei, an online course business that teaches how to implement personal financial systems to achieve financial goals quickly. They live in Provo, Utah with their 2 children. They enjoy traveling, eating at new restaurants, teaching others about money, and reading an inordinate amount of books. All right, so Dan, we'll let you take it away.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me. It's great to be here. I'm excited to talk about what's become a huge passion of mine, which is building online courses and education. And it sounds like some of you have a lot of experience with that. So let's dive right in. The first thing I'd like to do is just explain how I got into this and how it all started. I didn't necessarily set out to build my own online course or end up doing this full time. It just kind of happened through a lot of actually miserable experiences. So I'll start with kind of how that came about. But yes, like Sarah said, we're the co-founders of a company we run full-time called Sensei Financial. We teach married couples how to budget and achieve goals. We've created 3 online courses around investing, budgeting, and also a program around how to build your own online program. We've coached close to 1,000 individuals now through our programs, and have been really able to see a lot of cool things through that, and also coached dozens of people personally on how to build their own online course. And we run Sensei together. My wife was going to be here, but our babysitter fell through, and she's with our 2 little ones. So a couple years ago when I was married, I was also running a separate company at the time, a digital marketing company. And I wanted to, I thought I was going to become rich from running this company. But one of my main issues is that I did not handle the money well. I did not handle money well in my personal life or my business world. And as many of you have had experiences or know people who've had these experiences, if you don't handle the money well, it's hard to sustain life and a business. And that's what happened with us. I put myself about $20,000 of debt right at the beginning of our marriage, and we couldn't really afford rent or groceries. I was very stubborn. I didn't want to go get a job. I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And it became a huge stress on our new marriage. We began to fight and argue a lot. And it got so bad, I remember one time just storming out of our apartment, wondering if I was going to come back and, how is our marriage going to work? So with all of that being said, we kind of got to this point in our lives where one of us was going to need to humble ourselves. And I didn't want it to be me, but we didn't really have any money and we didn't really know what we were going to do next. So we did the next most logical thing, which is we went on vacation. We went on a road trip to a friend's wedding. And at that wedding, we talked to some friends' parents who'd been married for a couple decades. They were very successful. And we just asked them, how have you been able to manage your money and your finances successfully together? And they taught us, they said a couple things that I'll never forget. One is that as an adult, you just don't necessarily know how to manage money automatically. And 2, it's important to go get educated. And I had to humble myself and realize that I didn't necessarily know what I was doing when it came to business finances or my personal finances. So on the way back, we started to read every personal finance book we could get our hands on. We interviewed millionaires, people who were kind of quiet millionaires, people who looked like they were loud millionaires, whatever we thought. Anyone who said they were successful with finances, we started to interview them. We started to try to find out how we wanted to build a life around that. We read entire financial blogs of people who retired early. And we spent over 1,000 hours learning about money and personal finance systems. And we ended up paying off that $20,000 of debt in 6 months while we were finishing our undergraduate degrees. And we wrote an article about it, not really expecting there to be a lot of fanfare, but it kind of blew up and we got a lot of attention. We realized that a lot of people, specifically couples, were struggling with finances and how to manage money effectively. Often one person felt more stressed about it than the other. And that article led us get invited on a bunch of podcasts, which increased our reach and audience. And we ended up teaching people about finances, just kind of one-on-one in our living room. And then that kind of evolved into we can't do that full time because we'll run out of time. So we ended up developing our own online course. And that was a struggle at first. So all of this, we've been working on the course for a while. It wasn't really growing. It wasn't able to really provide for ourselves fully. It was a little bit of side income. But this led us to April of 2020 of last year. And I was running sales full time at a restaurant technology startup. And I was doing okay with that, but there was a lot of ambiguity. Commission was still being worked out. I was feeling frustrated about kind of our financial situation. I finally had humbled myself and gotten a job. We were teaching people about finances on the side together, and our end goal was to be able to run this online course full time. And we were making about $200 to $600 a month from this online course. So and like I mentioned, we've been working on it pretty much since we had we'd written that article, gotten out of debt, and been invited on those podcasts, but it wasn't really going anywhere. Well, in April 2020, I lost my job because it turns out being part of a restaurant technology startup in the beginning of a worldwide pandemic was not the best place to be. And we lost our funding and needed more funding. And so they decided to keep all the engineers and let myself and the marketing team go. And I was kind of left with a little online course side hustle. Luckily, we lived what we taught when it came to finances, so we had a really solid runway, and we decided to go full time on it. What would happen if we really focused on this online course for 6 months? What could we do with this? And the problem was we had no idea how to really grow Sensei. We were still working on it plenty, but we just didn't know how to find and get repeat customers and convert them. And we knew that it was a need. We knew people were interested, but we just didn't know how to grow it. So we were all over the place. We started trying to get on more podcasts. We ran a newsletter. We contacted Instagram influencers. We tried to be active on all the social media platforms. I even went door to door trying to sell this to couples. We did partnerships, created ebooks, tried and tested Facebook ads, Google ads, and giveaways. But all of this led us in multiple directions with really minimal and poor results. And they brought a lot of traffic, but not consistent revenue. I didn't know how to continually get clients through the door and have them purchase our program and have success with the program. But I knew if they got in the program, they would. So after that 6 months, we went from $200 to $600 a month to starting to make about $5,000 a week. And what happened? What was the difference in that 6 months that led us from working on this for a year and a half and making $200 to $600 a month to a six-figure runway and now beyond that? And the answer to that is several things. We realized that the best way to grow an online company was to create a repeatable, scalable, and marketing system that would allow us to grow Sensei as much as we wanted to. And that's a little bit, like duh, but it's not always that obvious because you don't know how to do it. And so we started searching for that. We started really focusing on, instead of wasting our time on all these other ideas, how could we convert people consistently? And we also realized that we really had to stick with this. If this was something we were going to grow and live off of full time and be able to run, then we couldn't give up when it got hard or when we felt depressed. We had to really commit. And so all of that has led us to the 5 steps to building and selling your online course. I've repeated these 5 steps 3 times now. I've helped dozens of people repeat them and create six-figure online course businesses. And I'm hoping that from what you learned today, you can get started on your own as well. So that leads us to step number 1, which is ideate. And that's pursuing the right idea for you. It's really easy to think of an idea and run with it, but it needs to be the right idea that really is focused on you. So how do you know what you should build a course on, or what would be a good idea to try to test to build a course on? This leads me to tell you that you're already an expert. And you may say, well, I don't feel like an expert, but you are. You are a unique individual with unique life experiences, a unique career, and there are certain things that you've developed, know, and understand that other people don't. An expert is somebody who's just a few steps ahead of the people that they're teaching. And you are that. In several categories, you have expertise, and that is something that people will pay you for if you are able to develop it, test it, and craft it in the right way. And so here is how you can kind of discover and really think about and ponder these 5 questions to identify what that expertise is in, what niche and group of people you need to serve, and how to help them. So that's the first question you need to ask yourself. What areas or what niche are you a couple steps ahead of yourself in? I think someone mentioned they've already created a 6-figure course, helping pharmacists go into consulting or something like that. I apologize if I misunderstood that. But that's an area of expertise. She's teaching pharmacists something she's already done herself. But where are you a couple steps ahead of other people in? Looking at those specific areas or niches, which 2 to 3, and maybe 1 to 2, are you most able to help others get to where you're at? Where could you show somebody a step-by-step process to repeat what you've been able to do? If you've created sourdough, an awesome sourdough recipe and sourdough starters, and you've been able to do that, you probably have a step-by-step process. Maybe it's not even written down, but it's in your mind that you know what to do. Of those ideas where you are able to help people get ahead, which one are you most passionate about? That passion is what carries you through when it gets tough. Of the niche or area you are most passionate about, which aspects are you most the expert in? So when it came to finances, there was a lot of things that we could have helped people do. By the time we started teaching people courses, we could help people get started investing. We could help people start budgeting. We could help people start a side hustle. There was a lot of different things we could have done, but we really narrowed it down to budgeting. And so that was the one we were most passionate about. And then of those specific aspects of a specific niche, which aspects are you most able to help others achieve? And as you take time to think about these questions, you probably aren't going to look at these questions and like how magically just know, but right now there's ideas going through your head. And that should be proof to you that there is expertise you have that you can monetize, build, and sell that will benefit other people's lives. And so it's really important that you take time, screenshot this if this is something you're interested in, because you need to ponder these questions and think of that idea, identify that idea so that you can then validate that idea. So once you've gone through this process, and this is how we did it, you will be able to begin to test them. That'll be step number 2, which we'll talk about. So here's how we specifically have gone through this process. What areas or niche are we a couple steps ahead of others in? Well, we had paid off $20,000 of debt in college students. We'd figured out how to get on the same page as a couple. We developed a financial system that really worked for us. And my wife was also a fitness coach, a wellness coach, so she could have created a course around that. We eventually, when we went in this process, we created a successful online course. So we can teach, we're a couple steps ahead of others in that. Looking at those areas, which were we most able to get to help other people to get to where we were at? Well, the budgeting and the systems we developed, we created spreadsheets, we figured out how to automate and manage our finances. And so we really got passionate about the financial systems for couples. And that was what we decided to do next. And then of those 2 to 3, it was the financial systems. Of those, we were most passionate. Specifically, we had a lot of interest initially from like young professionals, and we were really passionate about helping married couples because it had really changed our marriage to get on the same page financially. So that was what we chose there. And then we felt like the combination of married couples and financial systems was what we were going to be most able to really achieve and help married couples do. So that was kind of how we viewed that process. We've repeated this process when we thought about building another online course, and we'll continue to when we build more online courses. So after you've gone through that process, you've ideated, it's time to validate. And we want to make sure that people will actually pay you for your expertise and your idea before we end up spending all this time making videos and content and starting blogs and social media channels, because it's really important that you know this is something that's going to be worth your time before you spend months on it. And if I'd known this, it would have saved us it would have saved us a year and a half before we got started. So you really need to find the people that you will serve. Once you've gone and you've thought about what your expertise is, what niche you're going to serve, and what you're going to teach them, or what you'd be able to help show them and help them achieve, you need to go find where they're gathered. And the best way to do this is to reach out to a minimum of 5 people who fit that criteria and interview them and ask them and find out where their problems are, where their needs are, and find out also where they go for information. So what should you ask during these interviews? What is your biggest frustration? And if I was to do this with personal finance, with budgeting, with managing money in your marriage, and let people talk. It's your job during this phase to interview, to listen, and to understand. And question number 2, if you could control one aspect about your personal finances, what would it be and why? Or if you could control one aspect around your pharmaceutical career, or or your creativity in making sourdough, whatever that may be. What are the social media networks you hang out on most? Who do you follow? What type of influencers do you follow? And that's really important to ask that question, because you'll be able to see who these people are following. And if they're following these type of people and hanging on these networks, it's very likely that people similar to them are also there. And so that gives you a starting place to find more of these people who are in your target market that you can begin to validate your idea with. And so minimum of 5 interviews on that. Record these interviews on a Zoom call. It's really easy. So you can refer back to them, rewatch them, go over what they say, how they say it, the things they talk about, problems. They'll reveal more information. And you can ask more questions than that. People are often going to, in these interviews, not only give you really valuable information, but also ask you why you're asking, because they want to solve this problem. And so then we can go to building an audience or borrowing an audience, because now we kind of know from these interviews where our target market is, where we should start working on social media, so that we're not just trying to do all social media platforms, but we pick the right places to spend our time and invest our energy. So how did we do this at Sensei? We interviewed 5 people and taught 5 people one-on-one who said they wanted to learn about finances. We began building an audience where they said they hung out. We started on Instagram, because that was where a lot of our audience was at first. We also started to reach out to the people they said they followed. So in our interviews, people said they followed a certain influencer. There was a certain influencer that came up again and again. We ended up connecting with that influencer and doing like a free interview, like podcast type thing, to help gain more interest, to make sure this was something people were interested in. As we were able to say, hey, we interviewed somebody and they said that this is something they were interested in learning more about, and they followed you. And they said they also thought more people in your audience would want that. This influencer wanted us to come and speak, because that's value and content for her people. So that was how we did that. And so once we have begun to do this, we've interviewed people, we've begun building an audience, we begin posting on the right social media channels because we know we're in the right places, and we begin borrowing audiences from people who've already gathered our correct target market for us. It's time to launch a beta program. And we are going to then, at this point, create the first edition of our webinar, which is our main converting tool, and also our course. So you've built and borrowed an audience by this point, and you will then invite them to a webinar or a presentation. And this is kind of a first training of where you will talk about and help people understand a little bit more of your process and your expertise. And on this presentation webinar, you will teach a small intro to your program. So you'll actually teach people a little bit to demonstrate your expertise. And you'll explain that you are launching the first edition of your course and program soon. And it's really a test, because if people will buy your first edition after attending your beta webinar, your idea is validated. Once somebody has given you money for your program, you have a validated idea that will most likely sell. And if it will sell, it will most likely scale. There are some fine points to that as well. Then after that, after you've had people pay you for your program, then you focus on actually building the course after people have paid you. And at this point, it doesn't have to be this perfectly crafted YouTube studio product. The people understand this is your first edition. They understand it's the beta. They understand that this is the first time that you are teaching it. They're also getting a deal for coming in as your first edition students. But because you have now made sure that people are paying you for the right thing, you can then build a program that will help you get these students from point A to their end desired result. In our case, it was having a budgeting system that worked, that would allow people to save more money than they were currently doing. And for our other program, it's helping people take, an idea, a course idea, to a full-on scaling course. And so once you have paying students for that, you are now motivated pretty much week to week to do live sessions and teach these people once a week. And you will get questions, you'll get feedback, and it will really help you craft your course into after the beta, when you make it into the full edition and relaunch it. So you've been paid, you deliver, and this is a great way to ensure that you actually get people results, because on this beta, you'll be teaching your course live. And so you'll be getting that feedback, you'll be interacting with them directly, and it's awesome, because you can see what questions or gaps may be in your course, and you're building your product with your customer, with a paying customer. So how did we do this at Sensei? Well, we had a product, and if we'd done it in this order at first, it would have been way better. But we had to learn this because we did it all backwards. But we did our first webinar in June of 2020, so over a year ago, and it was this, even though we'd already built our course, like I said, that was risky because it took us a whole year and a half before we did a beta webinar, and we hadn't been getting many results. And so having a converting webinar also, when you know that people are going to buy your program from a webinar, you can get repeatable clients because all you need to do is have more people watch that training. And so this was our training, the 4 budgeting mistakes most people make and how to fix them to achieve your financial goals. And we would do 2 live sessions a week. Now we do it completely automated and recorded. There's ads running to this training right now. There's people watching this training right now as we speak. And then they sign up for our program or sign up to speak with a member on our team who then purchases our course. But this webinar, this training became the main converting factor for us, and we can repeat it because we've had thousands of people go through this. So we know our numbers, we know what we can spend to get somebody into this, and we also know that it will get people to buy. So step number 4 is then launch after we've completed our beta. And we want to then sell our validated idea to the public. So let's just review. You've ideated, you came up and thought about where you are a couple steps ahead of people in your expertise. You've then validated that idea by conducting interviews, posting where you know your target audience is from the people you've interviewed, and also working with people that your target audience already follows. You will then launch a live webinar to them for a beta program where people will pay you after you've actually received money. Then you will build a beta program that will be able to sell and you'll be able to work with those first students to make sure that your program is up to snuff and actually gets people the results that you're promising. And so after you've done that and you've revised your full program, it's time to then relaunch to the public because you can prove now that you've gotten people results. You can prove that it's successful. You got paid to essentially build your program, and it's time to now scale because you have a converting webinar and you have a course that actually gets people results. So what do you need to do to prepare for this launch? You need to make sure that your program really does help get people the results you said they would. You make any edits after you've had those first students through. You prepare to do a major launch because through this time you've continued to build and borrow audiences, meaning you're continually posting and growing your audience on the channels where you know your target market is. And you're working with people, those people follow because you talk to your first students and understand where they're going for information. And so your audience has continued to grow. And then you launch your full webinar with full pricing for a program that you know gets people results. So how did we do this at Sensei? After we finally figured out that the webinar was what was going to help get us results, we completely renamed and refocused our course to make sure that it was actually solving their problem and actually getting them the results that they wanted. And then we launched webinars that allowed us to get repeatable and consistent clients, and that we didn't have to be afraid of if we weren't wondering how the month was going to do. We could actually predict our revenue. And that leads us to step 5, which is to scale it after you have a validated, launched, and proven model. And this is how you can grow your company at this point. Well, there's a lot of things to optimize and improve because when you have a webinar funnel, there's a lot of different things you can do. You can get more people who register for the webinar to actually show up. For example, we had 60 people register for this event. I think there's 23 or 24 here now. And so what can I do to get more of the people who actually registered to come? What can I do to get more of those people who registered and didn't come to watch the replay? What can I do to get more of those people who visit the sales page or book a call with a member of our team to discuss the product to actually show up and take that call or to actually buy? And there's a lot of different things you can do to optimize and improve that. Continue doing what you've been doing. Once you've been able to get people to a webinar, if you're able to get people to sign up for a webinar and a free training, a certain percentage of those people will buy. And so keep posting in the right places. Keep working with the people your target market say are the people they're following, the people you've been interviewing. Keep interviewing people so you really understand what their needs are. And as you continue to do that, you'll continually get clients and continually grow. And then create systems so you don't have to be the one doing all the work. Work on the company, not in the company. Hire people to manage a customer support, hire a bookkeeper. And this is when you start to be able to focus more on big picture and growth, because a digital product is beautiful because implementation is relatively easy. They just get login information and they show up and do, unless you're adding additional coaching or Q&As or things like that. So working on creating systems so you don't have to be the one doing the work is a huge part of being able to grow. And the other part I would just add to this is find additional ways to drive traffic to your webinar. Our two main sources are Facebook ads and partnering with other people. And so we work with lots of Instagram influencers. We work with companies to do presentations for their companies. And that is how we've been able to grow it. And those are often free leads. We'll do a profit sharing model. But that is often how we are able to grow and get more traffic to our free webinar. So we continue to post, we continue to our audiences. We now pay for technologies that automate a lot of the work. We have virtual assistants who take care of a lot of the manual labor that we don't need to be able to do. And it's become, and as far as a day-to-day business, something that is actually fully automated. And we just need to continue to work on growing it by driving more traffic and testing out new things. And that's become my wife and I's main role while the system of the business runs itself. And a digital product is really easy to do that with because you have very low costs to get started and to manage it as far as fixed costs go. So that concludes the 5 steps to building and selling your own online course. There is a lot more to that. We don't have time to go through all of it. But I hope that's gotten your mind turning. And I hope that you're thinking about what you could potentially sell as your expertise in order to improve other people's lives. Because more important than the money, more important than the freedom this has given my family is the people who message us that say they've been able to go from from our personal finance courses that go from living in their parents' basement or being drowning in debt or not feeling or making a ton of money but not saving anything. It's really powerful, and that meaning of education and teaching and giving back has added a lot of meaning to our lives. And I'm grateful that we've been able to discover the online course business because it fulfills a lot of what I personally need as far as my career goes. I'm seeing some questions come in.
Sarah, do you want to start with the questions that they put into chat?
Yeah, so the first question we have from Alicia, how long are your courses typically?
Great question, Alicia. So often the courses what you need, it depends on your niche and what you're helping somebody do. So with our personal finance course, I think the course is in total 6 hours, but it doesn't matter how long it is. There's not a defined time of how long it needs to be. You need to build your course as long as it's needs to be to help people get the desired result. And so a lot of people try to confine themselves to, I can only have so many hours of content, or I can only do this. It's really not true. What needs to be included to help your target market get from point A to the desired result that you're advertising? Because you need to make sure that they're able to do that. And then also provide that support that they do complete the course and get the result. Hopefully that answers your question. One more point I would say to that is our bootstrap courses program, which is about building online courses, is like 20 hours of content. So it's significantly longer, but it's because there's so much more that needs to be included to build a successful online course business than setting up correct financial systems in a marriage, if that makes any sense. Okay, next question.
Okay, so from Bruce, we have, do you use a course software or did you build them from scratch?
As much as I wish I was I can't even say the word, technical. I did not build them from scratch. I use a free software, at least it's free at the beginning, called Thinkific. I'll put that in the chat. They're a company based out of Canada, and they allow you to essentially build your course, set up your course for free. You just have to use their URL. And that's how we operated for a long time until it made sense to actually buy the URL and upgrade to some more features. But it made it really easy to build out the course in a professional looking way without putting out any money. So I have not spent any money on this, on our course besides money we've actually made from it. And part it's because of the nature of digital products. You have very low fixed costs, you don't have inventory, things like that, and tools like thinkific.com, which allow you to essentially build out your course for free and then upgrade when you start actually selling.
Okay, perfect. How often do you post new content?
As far as courses or our social media channels?
Yes.
Both. Yeah. So content on social media channels is every day. We started on Instagram and we ended up switching to LinkedIn. I started getting a lot of traction on LinkedIn and grew over since April of 2020, grown from about 6,000 followers to about 23,000. And that has come from just posting consistently. And my content, often there's a lot of content that is terrible, like nobody like clicks on it or cares or wants to read it. But by practicing consistently and consistently trying and putting out content, it's gotten better, and I've understood more of what people are looking for, and I'm able to help them as well. And then as far as courses go, once you have a proven course, it's a lot of work to put out a proven course. I don't want to portray this as a get rich quick scheme, because it's definitely not. But we create courses when we start to get asked for them a lot, and then we go through this 5-step process to validate that it really is something that we should build. And so I have so many course ideas, things I want to do, but it makes sense once you have a validated course that you know people want and is helping people and actually helps people get the result, to work on continually growing that. And eventually we'll build those courses, but for now it's focusing on what's already working.
Okay. How much of the content do you give out for free compared to what would be paid for? How do you know if it's enough to like catch a client?
Yeah, so most of the content that we do is based off of being inspirational and helping change people's beliefs, because people like tactical information, but they don't often apply it until they actually believe that it will work. So probably our most popular free content is tactical information, but I find that a lot of people don't do anything with it. And so and the other problem with a lot of free content is it's not in a structured step-by-step format. And so a lot of people will not build a course because they'll say, I can go, the people I would sell to can go find all this information online. Well, that's true, but what you're doing is organizing it into a step-by-step process to get the desired result. And that's actually very difficult, because there's a lot of information online, but it isn't actually built to that tactical step-by-step. Here's what to do next. Here's how you know you're succeeding, and that coaching aspect that helps people know they're on the right path. So as far as our free content, we do free trainings. I mean, only about 3 to 5% of the people who attend our free trainings actually end up buying our full program. But most of them who come to the free trainings will watch the whole thing, because there's still value. Even in this training, for example, this is more than I would typically do, because I'm not here to try to make money off this presentation. I'm a friend of Chet's. But what most people do is they still will take that information, and then they'll come back when they realize it's more complicated than just what you can do in 45 minutes. Often the most valuable programs have a combination of information and coaching, and you record the information so that people can learn what on their own, and then you have coaching sessions or Q&As where you can really make sure that people are applying it, but you don't have to spend those coaching times or actually teaching them what they can learn on their own time, and you can spend that time coaching. So I think I went off on some tangents there, but hopefully that answers the free versus paid for content question.
Yeah, that's perfect. I mean, I like your point of there's so much stuff on the internet, but if someone can kind of gather it and make it into steps and then give that coaching, that's huge. We have a question from Chet. It appears that you need to segment what you are offering and also your customer base. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, the niche, it really comes down to getting really focused on who you're helping and what are you helping them do. And it's so tempting because you see so much opportunity, especially at the beginning, of so many different people you can help. For example, when we first launched our very first edition of our course, when we had no idea what we were doing, a lot of my colleagues at Qualtrics bought it. And so we were like, man, all these young professionals would buy it. And they were actually an easier sell than a married couple because you had to get a married couple, both people on board. But the power of what was happening in the married couples' lives was so much more meaningful, and we saw so much them getting so much more results. And actually, it wasn't just changing their financial situation; it was changing their marriage. And for us, that was more meaningful, and so we ended up pursuing them. And if we were to go back and pursue young single professionals, that would be a different approach, and we kind of need to go through the same process because we've geared so much of our marketing and segmented so much towards married couples and finances.
Can I make a comment on that point?
Yeah.
Before I retired a couple of years ago, the last 25 years, I did consulting in the area of helping companies improve their operations. And my point here is when a company says, we have a problem, we're not making enough money, that's a very high level problem. You really need to say, well, why are you not making enough money? Well, our sales aren't high enough. Well, why is it your sales aren't high enough? What is it about the sales process? And people often would say to me, what do you do differently now that you've been doing this for 25 years as opposed to when you first started? And I said, I ask a lot more questions. And so if we use the example of the person that said she's already got a course for pharmacists, I'm thinking she would spend a lot of time saying, well, who is my potential customer? Is it a pharmacist that's just starting? Is it a pharmacist that's worked for a big company and now wants to go out on their own? Is it a female pharmacist? Is it a male pharmacist? So you're kind of scoping this out. And so I'm thinking, to use her as an example, she needs to spend some time, and she probably already has this information, but she needs to know there's probably many thousands, hundreds of thousands of pharmacists in the United States or around the world. And that's another case. Would she focus mostly in the United States, where probably the professional rules are the same, or not? So in the work that I did, even though there was a 5-step process, you spent almost half of your time on the first step scoping out what is the problem and what part of the problem do you work on. So it seems to me, if you're going to do a successful course, if we use the pharmacist as an example, what segment of the pharmacy group does she think she can help? And what is it that is causing them a problem that they would say, oh, I've just had to put up with that problem in the past. If you could help me with these 2 or 3 things. So you'd be segmenting the problem. What part of the problem do you want to work on? And you'd also segment the pharmacist. What category of pharmacist would I talk about? So that's the way I'm kind of looking at it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that. And the more you do it, the more it becomes clear. And the more it becomes clear, the more you can target, and the more you can target, the more you can find those people and then help them with your program. But I would say that's 100% accurate, Chet.
So what are some tips that you would give to decide how specific your niche needs to be? I mean, finance is such a big thing and you narrowed it down to budgeting. Like, how did you do that?
Yeah, those 5 questions that I talked about at the beginning are very powerful. If you ponder those, like we went over them in 2 minutes, so you need to really take some time and think about that. The other problem sometimes you do have is going too niche, because you have to have a big enough market to sell to. So if some people's advice in other business industries, I've heard to niche down until it hurts, and where you're saying no to so many people, and you're saying no to it's like really hard to find anybody who can actually buy your course, and there are ways to succeed with that. I personally like to narrow my niche enough down that I know there's enough people who are going to buy from the validation process, meaning I'm posting and I'm getting on the channels that I was told from those interviews, and I'm reaching out to the influencers that those interviewees say that they're following, and they're responding well and positively to the topics that I'm talking about. And whatever I do with them, whether that be like an interview type podcast thing or a small free live training or something, that they respond well. And then I'm getting additional questions. That will typically tell me that the market size is big enough. Now, depending on the size that the size of problem I'm helping people solve, then I can also, if it's niche enough and the problem is big enough, then I don't need as many people. For married couples and budgeting, I have a big market. For people who want to build an online course, it's smaller and it's more involved and intensive. And so through that validation process, that's kind of how you can see and feel. You get a sense by being in the weeds, by actually talking to these people, who your market is and how big it actually is. If that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. How do you determine how to price your courses?
Great question. There's several ways to do this. I don't think that people should charge. Most people who start an online course will start selling it for like $20, $30. That's too little. It's going to be so hard to scale, and you're going to have to sell that product to so many people to be able to grow it. And so I typically don't let the people that I work with sell their product for less than $300. And what you need to do that is we don't want to rip people off. We want it to make sure it's valuable. So we need to add and make sure that there's parts of this program that really do make it worth the amount of money that it is. So for our budgeting course, we started selling it for $120. We now sell it for $800. And the change that we added to that is we added a community of people who are participating and help each other implement the budgeting practice we talk about. So if they have questions, they can go to one another. And there's that community of people who speak the same financial language. And then they also, instead of just giving them information and telling them good luck, they had the ability to work with us one-on-one for a certain time period for a couple months. And so they had direct access to us. And so there was an increased value that instead of just saying, here's this course, you need to just go figure it out. You had a community and you had coaching, and that's worth more. That's more valuable, and people are able to get better results. And so how do you determine how you price your courses? It's how you determine what you offer and what you're going to be able to sustain and do, and how much time you're going to spend helping them get the desired result, and how big that market is and how big that problem really is for that market.
Okay, thank you. How do you get feedback from your clients, and how does that affect what you do in your courses?
Absolutely. So in Thinkific, it's a fantastic platform. They actually have, at the end of every module, you can kind of put a survey and say, hey, what questions do you have after watching this? And also the combination of that with the Facebook group, you can see what questions people are asking. So over time, we go through those once a month and directly answer them to the people. But we then, if we see repeated questions, we then add that to the digital product and course, which prevents more questions like that in the future. So it eliminates the need for people who are getting confused, and it also improves the course because they don't have to ask as many questions and they're able to do it on their own. And so you're never going to build a course where nobody has any questions. You're always going to need to be continually reiterating, continually improving, and you just build those mechanisms into the course. It's really easy from that standpoint to just have continual feedback and just review it. And then it's a digital product, so you can update it relatively easily.
Okay, thank you. You talked a lot about marketing efforts, how you kind of switched, I think it's from Instagram to, you do a lot with LinkedIn now. what tips do you have for marketing?
Do it. Um,
How do you know
it's-
where to start? Like, how do you start with everything to see what works best for your area, or like, is that too
Yeah.
many things at once?
Yeah, so that's a big problem is most people like to believe that the channel is the magic bullet to their marketing problems. This is rarely the case. What often needs to happen is you need to focus. And so how you choose to focus is in those interviews you conduct during step 2. You talk to these people on these interviews who you've probably directly reached out to, sent an email, you had to kind of hunt these people down, but you ask them, what social media channel do you use the most? And what are you doing on that social media channel? And so from that answer, you kind of get an understanding of where people are hanging out, where your target market is. And that kind of helps you see where other people are that are like them. And so the most manual process of finding out where to go is that for those first 5 interviews of people, the 5 people you think are going to be in your target market. And you don't know, like, marketing and entrepreneurship are total acts of faith, because it's literally just going from one step to the next and learning from each of those activities and saying, okay, now knowing what I know from doing that, where should I go next? So on Instagram, we started doing that. Instagram still works for us. We still post, but we diverted our activity to LinkedIn and really figuring that out when the growth from LinkedIn took off. And so I like doing how we kind of approach it now. At the beginning, you really need to focus, but after you grow, I like kind of a 80% on one platform, and then I'm just putting out little feelers on other platforms to see how people are responding. So I'm not diverting all my time and energy away from the golden goose, which is typically that one main platform. So that's how we discovered LinkedIn. But we focused very closely on Instagram, and we've said no to TikTok. We've said no to SEO and Google ads, starting our own podcast, even though we've been asked by all that many times. We've just been we've failed a lot, but we've tried to be very intentional about where we spend time. And marketing is simply testing again and again. And then when you find something that works, you scale what works, and then you move on to the next thing. But most people give up after it doesn't work after a few weeks, and you can't do that. It's a long-term game, especially at the get-go.
Yeah, it does get very overwhelming with how many social media platforms there are out there, and you can't do everything. All right, do we have any other questions? We'll give people just a minute to write some down if they think of any. Dan, do you have any other tips or anything that came up or that you thought of that you want to share?
I guess my last question is, has this been helpful for those of you who've been thinking about this? Has this been interesting? Is it hopefully got the juices going? I really do want people who want to create courses to go for it, because it's been such a blessing in my life. But I hope this has been helpful and maybe seeing that there is a path to doing it.
Sarah, I noticed a question someone just put on the chat. Does he have a course on online courses?
I do have a course on online courses. I'm willing to chat with you about that outside of this. I didn't want this to be a sales pitch. But if you'd like to chat with me about that, my email, put it in the chat. We can set up a time to talk. But you can feel free to send me an email there, and I'm more than happy to talk through the details of that with you. And that one's, yeah, if that's something you're interested in.
Thank you.